Why, hello there, my internet friends. My name is John Jags, and today you are watching part 2 of my How to Make Board Game Pieces series. In this episode, we are going to be talking about how to set up a color map for board game pieces, such as a token or a card. In this video, we're talking about a token because we need to be able to flip the token over and around and see both sides of it. So let's dive into Photoshop and After Effects to talk about that. All right, so we are in Photoshop now, and we have our layers of things, so then we can start adding our tokens. Now, I want to say one quick thing. You can do this in Photoshop, but I'm going to pivot this tutorial and do the rest of it in After Effects. But effectively, if you were wanting to do this in Photoshop, you would bring in your front and your back and scale them up to the correct size. Bring in your back, scale it up, position them over the circle where they belong respectively. So this back would actually go on the top portion, and then this would go on the bottom. Maybe scale this up just a touch. And then we would hit with the token above the front, Control-Alt-G, and that's going to constrain or create a clipping mask so it only lives on that section. Same thing with the top, and scale that up just a little bit, maybe a little more because I realized the top part of the image is cut off, and then Control-G, Control-Alt-G, and now we would have a token color map that we can bring into our Substance Painter, or you could just theoretically do all of your material making in here. However, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this in After Effects, and there's a reason why. So when it comes to board game pieces, when we are working in Adobe After Effects, we can create batches of all of our objects for our board game in a sequence that represents the number of tokens that we have in the game. So I know that there's 2 of the boots and swords, and if you see in my sequence down here, we have a number of just images laid out in a sequence, but this is equal to the number of tokens in the game. And the reason why this is valuable is because then we can create batches of UV maps as a JPEG sequence. I know I'm getting really hairy here, but think about it like this. We're going to go to a new composition in my UV folder here. We'll call this Circle Token UVs. Call this 4096 by 4096. And then we want to make sure that's 24 frames per second. We'll set this to, 15 seconds. It's definitely going to be less than that, but we'll start there. So 1500 for 15 seconds, click OK. So now what I want to do is go to my elements, and I know I have that sequence of tokens. And then I want to go into my folder, my raster Photoshop folder, and I want to import that template that I just made. So we'll go to UVs, tokens, circle token. Make sure that I import this as a composition. Click OK. Then I'm going to double click that, take all of these layers, copy them, and then paste them, and they should go into place. So now what I can do is with the token sequence selected, I can set this sequence directly where it needs to be, and maybe scale it up just a touch. And then we can set this as a track mat to the front. So now we can center it up where we need to, and we can actually take this UV mesh layer that we have, drag it on top, and if we right click and set this to a guide layer, it won't render when we make our sequence, but it'll give us a foundation of where our geometry is. So now what we can do is make sure we don't move our UV mesh layer. We can lock that layer, select our token, just scooch it over so it's centered like so. Then what we're going to do is bring in the back. So I know that this folder, if I right click, if I go into that pre-comp of where those images are, and then right click, reveal layer source and project. I can see where those PNGs are in my After Effects project. Then I can go back to my tokens UV tab, and then I can bring this into my composition. So now I have my UV back, and then I can just scale this up to fit the circle, and then set this as a track matte to the back. Now I realize it's not fully centered, so let's just scooch it into a place that is more visually appealing, and that looks good to me. So after I position my backside, I can see that I now have a PNG or JPEG sequence, a sequence of all of these tokens with the correct and corresponding backside. So now what I can do is I can make sure that I hit all the tokens in the game. So I know that there's these blue ones on the bottom. So I'm going to make sure that I add those really quick. And I can just drag this into place. And let's turn on my UV mesh layer again and position that where it needs to be. Scale it up. And make sure that it fits the entire section of that. Then I can set the track matte to the front. And I'm going to duplicate the Soul Eater, and then I'm going to drag it up, and I'm going to set this track matte to the backside, and then I can just bring it down. And then I can turn off my UV mesh layer, and then set the in and out of these right there, and I can set that out point to right there. And then I know I'm going really fast. I can hit N on my keyboard and it'll set my work area, and I can see that I now have a sequence of all of the tokens for this game. How awesome is that? So then I can hit Control M on my keyboard, click on the render settings, set this to JPEG sequence, go to my output to, and we're going to go to wherever we want to save this. So I want to save this in my Stoneblade Ascension Tactics folder, Elements, UVs, and we'll call this Circle Tiles. Save that in there, uncheck Save in Subfolder, and then we can hit Render. And now it's going to save all of those tokens as a JPEG, which is exactly what I want. And now we can go into Substance Painter and create some nicer looking materials so that when we bring this into the final render engine, we have a cool looking token for the animation that we're doing. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this part of the Board Game Pieces series. In the next one, we're going to be getting a little bit deep and hairy into Substance Painter and Unreal Engine so we can make the little token that we have shine just a little bit more. But until then, I'll leave you with the final tip. Eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight and you'll make some gains. Goodbye, my friends. Bye.